Hello all. It's just a quick video for your composition lesson this afternoon. Um, if you could use the time to work on your free compositions which you started last week, that would be very, very helpful. I'm producing this video just as the first in a series of some quick analyses of interesting pieces that I'll start putting together with a view that at least some of them will be helpful for your own composition work. So today we're going to look at the Grieg Nocturne, Opus 54, number 4, because I think it does some quite interesting things structurally. So yeah, here we go. Without further ado, here's the piece. So I'll just play it through for you at the piano, so you get a sense of what it sounds like. But I think there's plenty of recordings online. In fairness, if you want to hear another rendition, right, here it is. Cool. Okay. So there's the piece. So it's a relatively kind of straightforward ternary form piece, with a few linking passages and a coda at the end. But what is interesting about the piece is that it's trying to get to a really strong, perfect cadence in the tonic in C major, but it keeps losing its way. That perfect cadence keeps being undermined by the direction of the harmony. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at this piece section by section to see what Grieg does in order to deny us that perfect cadence over the course of this piece. And then I'll just talk maybe through a few points about how these analyses might be useful in your own A-level compositions. So, the first section, we get introduced to our sort of initial idea, and then it's trying, or we start to get hints that we might be heading towards a perfect cadence at the end, but it always seems to slip away. So we have our, the sort of the idea that we're familiar with. But then in bar 9, we land on chord 2. Sort of the major chord 2, so D major, and actually with the major chord 2, we might expect a progression that moves from chord 2, then goes to chord 5, and then goes to chord 1. So we might, if I play from bar 9 and then sort of try to work out what we might expect, we might get something like this. We might get something a little bit like that, but Grieg doesn't give us that. Grieg instead does some quite clever voice leading. We land on chord 1, and then after we land on chord 2, we land on chord 6B, or actually flat 6B, A flat major. And then we go back to chord 2, and we might end up on chord 5 again, but we don't. We go to chord 3-7, so E7, and then maybe we go back to chord 2 and we might end up at chord 5, and this time we do end up on chord 5, and this creates an imperfect cadence at the end of the phrase. So I'll just play through that extract up on the screen again for you, just so you can kind of hear what it sounds like in isolation. Okay, so that's roughly it. So yeah, we have this sort of expectation that we might end up on chord 5 and land on a perfect cadence, but we don't. We end up with this imperfect cadence at the end of the first section. We then move straight on to a linking section, which focuses on the dominant chord. We've got a dominant 9th chord in bars 15 to 17. And again, that might land on chord 1, but instead, in bar 18, we get that same chord, but we move it up a minor third. So we end up with a B flat dominant chord. So I'll just play that through again. So here's bar 15. Here's the linking section, which lands on the B section in bar 18, 19, 20, 21. Okay, all right, and then we have this più mosso section, the B section in the middle, and this is sort of, it still builds the tension up to the first kind of big climax in the piece at bar 29 to 30. And the way this does this, it sort of lands on an E dominant 7th chord, and then it moves chromatically down through E, then E flat, then D, before then landing on a G dominant chord again. But that G dominant chord doesn't resolve at the end of the section. It's just kind of left hanging. It sort of peters out until we get this bar of silence. So again, we've got quite a lot of tension building through that section. until we get to the climactic point in bars, or one of the climactic points even, in bar 29 to 30. But then it's not really resolved properly. It just kind of deteriorates. Right, I'll play that through for you. Right, and then we're into this final section, which is effectively a varied repetition of the A section at the beginning. So we are reintroduced to the main idea, and then it's very much like the first section, except instead of kind of landing on chord 2 and then subverting the expectation that we might land on chord 5. This time we land on the dominant chord. We land on 5/7 in bar 43, but then we don't continue on to land on the tonic. So we land on chord 7, 5/7 in bar 43, and then we end up on the Neapolitan chord in bar 44. We go back to 5/7 in bar 45, and then end up on A7 on sort of the dominant 7th on chord 6 in bar 46, and then back to the dominant chord in bars 47 and 48, which again don't really resolve. They end up getting subverted again. So I'll actually just play that through from bar 42, so you can kind of hear what that's doing in isolation. Okay. So yeah, that's what that final section does. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to we'll move on now to the coda. Oh no, I lie. Right, we've got more on the final section even. So actually, yes. So the final section continues after that point. We sort of land again. We move down in sequence to F7 and B flat 7, and then we've got this chromatic descent again in bars 51 to 54, where we're moving down through E flat 7 down to G7, this sort of, it feels like a sped up version almost of the chromatic descent in the B section. So it does, we do get this sort of sense that it's sort of deteriorating away as we move, sort of as we descend through a number of sort of dominant sevenths. We do land on G7 on the dominant chord of the piece at the end, but again you can see that it's just sort of left hanging. There's a whole beat's rest after that. And then, even though we do get a sort of hint of the tonic chord in the coda, it's kind of undermined again. But I'll play through this extract here. So here's this F7 chord. And that, I mean, that passage there, the last sort of 3 bars of that, are arguably another kind of climactic moment in the piece, because we are generating a fair amount of harmonic tension by moving down through a series of dissonant chords, a series of these dominant sevenths. But yeah, straight onto the coda. So the coda starts again on C major, but there isn't a C in the bass this time, and the kind of the repeated sort of C and E dyad that we've had is moved up an octave. So it feels a lot weaker. Tonally speaking, it's a lot weaker. We typically get this, which really does set up our C major, but here we just get this, which is a lot less secure. And then we move on and we spend quite a lot of time on the subdominant, which tonally decreases the tension. We can say that the tension here is lessened because if we're thinking about our circle of fifths and we're starting on C, as we move clockwise around the circle of fifths, so we go from C to G and to D, we can think of that as increasing the tension. So that's why when we go from like tonic to dominant in a sonata form, we can say, the idea is that the tension has increased. And each move anti-clockwise around the circle of fifths decreases the tension. And so for keeping our circle of fifths in mind, C, one step up clockwise from C is G, the dominant, and then one step anti-clockwise from C is F major, the subdominant. So we spend a bit of time on the subdominant here in bars 56 and 57, and then we spend a bit of time on the subdominant minor in bars 59 and 60, which decreases the tension. But again, because we're not really, it doesn't sort of give us this perfect cadence, we can't say that the tension, the harmonic tension, has been fully resolved. The tension here has been lessened in the coda, but it's not quite right still. And then the cadence at the end substitutes chord 3B for chord 5. So instead of getting a 1-5-1 cadence, we get 1, 3B, and then 1. And we've said in our harmony lessons that, chords that can be substituted for chord 5, i.e. chords that share two common tones with chord 5, are chord 7 and chord 3. But really, chord 3 is not very common at all. It's not a very common dominant substitute. Off the top of my head, I actually can't think of another piece that does substitute chord 3. It really is quite rare. So this does, here chord 3 is being used as a sort of a dominant function chord, but again, it's not really a good, strong, perfect cadence. So even at the end, the tension's been lessened, and arguably the tension's been lessened a little bit more by this final perfect cadence, but the tension has not been fully resolved. We have not had our nice, full, perfect cadence. So I'll play the coda through. This is what the coda does. Okay, so there's sort of a quick analysis of the Grieg Nocturne. So why is this kind of useful within an A-level composition lesson? So first of all, the piece is about 3 minutes or thereabouts long. So it's the right length for an A-level composition, and it uses 2 bits of basic material. So it is achievable to write a piece like this. And also, it's kind of a compositional study in developing and sustaining tension through withholding a perfect cadence throughout the piece. And so, this is a technique that you might use. You might decide to take from this piece and deploy. So you might decide that you want to withhold a perfect cadence in a section of your piece. You might decide that you could take Grieg's technique of developing tension over a passage by chromatically moving through dominant seventh chords, or you might decide that you could obstruct the resolution of a dominant seventh chord through voice leading, as Grieg does in the A sections of this piece. So it could be this could be quite useful. You could take some of the techniques from this piece and deploy them in your own, which could be quite useful indeed. But anyway, that's basically me done for this piece. I'll try to produce a kind of a similar analysis for a short piece of music each week, focusing on a particular compositional technique. I hope they prove helpful. But yes, have a good afternoon and evening, and yeah, have a good weekend when it comes. Looking forward to seeing some of your compositional work soon. Cheers. Bye now.